afternoon. Thanks for your company. I'm Alana McLean and you're watching TickHER, where we celebrate representation and inclusion in business and shine a light on women who are making strides in their industries. We're brought to you today by Modibody, period and leak-proof apparel and underwear. For more info, you can head to modibody.com. Time now, though, to introduce you to my first guest today. And with Spring Racing Carnival right around the corner, which is one of my personal favourite times of the year, it is the perfect time to talk to the delightful Brittany Taylor. Brittany, to put it bluntly, has had racing in her blood. She was knee-high to a grasshopper when Britt grew up around the stables and horses and has now gone on to carve a name for herself in the traditionally male-dominated world of horse racing, becoming Australia's first female horseback reporter on the most esteemed day of the Australian racing calendar, Melbourne Cup. Brittany Taylor joins me live now. Hey, Britt.
Hi, Alana. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us here on TickHER, and I can't wait to chat to you because it is such an exciting time of the year. I start to get all pumped up for Spring Racing Carnival, but your story in regards to racing literally goes back right on the day you were born. You were born into racing. Your dad, Jim Taylor, was a jockey and now a trainer. Your grandma was obviously involved in the industry. You really didn't stand a chance of not being involved, did you?
Not at all, really. Let's be honest. When you're born into an industry so exciting, there's probably nothing else you would really rather do. But you're right. It was born into racing because on the day that I was born, Dad was riding in a race called the Ascot Gold Cup, and I think Mum's water broke in the morning and he was probably cursing her, thinking, no, not now, I've got to ride today. And he was on a very good chance in the race. And he was lucky. I came early. I came at 10:42 in the morning, and that meant that he had enough time to get to the sauna. The story goes that the nurse actually turned around and goes, "Where's your husband?" And Mum was like, "Oh, no, he's had to go to the sauna to lose another kilo before he can ride in the Ascot Gold Cup today." And sure enough, he won the cup, and I still have the cup to this day. Actually, when I celebrated my 21st, it was my drinking cup for the day. So it's always been something that I kept, and yeah, it's quite literally born into racing. In fact, Channel 10, this is a real full circle moment. Channel 10 actually came, and they were doing a racing show at the time, and they came and filmed Mum in the hospital the day I was born.
Oh my goodness. And it's so funny because now just hearing you tell that story, I was born on grand final day. And Mum said, we have to get to the hospital. And Dad said, on grand final day. So clearly both our dads loving their sport. But it is so funny, I guess, when you talk about racing, because they call it the sport of kings. And there is a perception that it's a lot of gloss. You know, we do see the birdcage and we see the celebrities, we see the fashion. And there definitely are those elements to it. But it's a hard slog, the racing industry. And you've been in this, I guess, boots in from, very early age. Describe, I guess, your typical day at the stables.
Well, you talk about gloss, but I'd say that my nail beds and like the cracked knuckles probably suggest that it's not all gloss. It obviously is a fair bit of hard work behind the scenes. A typical day for me starts with the sunrise. We basically are up before dawn and the first horses go out at night. So going through the horses and ready so that they're fit come race day and just, generally cared for. So a morning for me is probably riding around 8 horses a morning, generally sort of start at 6 and finish working them by 9. So it's a beautiful way to start the day.
Yeah, beautiful. But it's a lot, right? Like you are literally cleaning up the horse poop, you are in there with the gloves on, and there's a lot of elements to it that aren't pretty, that people never see.
No, that's right, is that when I think this time of year rolls around, everyone talks about race season, but racing actually happens all year round. Often I'm sort of shopping for an outfit come carnival time or earlier on in the year, and someone says to me, "Oh, what's this for?" And they're like, "Oh, not the Melbourne Cup." I said, "Well, actually racing is all year round, and that means that the horses require attention 7 days a week, 24/7 pretty much, and that means that there's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of hard working staff members in every stable around the country to get one horse ready for race day, where everyone will have their champagne and pop a bet on and enjoy the day, but there's a lot that goes into it just to get them ready for that day."
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, look, when we look at the history of the industry, it has really been a traditionally a male dominated industry. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. It definitely has been. As a female coming into the industry, and I guess coming from the background of doing the hard yards, being in the stables, cleaning the poop, as we said, but then I guess working your way into broadcasting and on-field reporting. How have you found that journey, I guess, as a female? And have you met any resistance along the way?
I think I've been really, really lucky, and I'm so aware of the fact that not everyone has been as lucky as that I've been in years gone by. You go back to my grandma's era; she was the first female trainer in WA, and she was met with a lot of resistance when she first went to the stewards and asked for a trainer's license. She was told three words, and they were never, never, never. A female would never be training horses, and to think that that happened in her lifetime, and now to look where we've come to now, I feel so incredibly grateful for the women who have, forged the path before me, not just like my grandma in the training space, but female jockeys and people who entered the broadcasting world as well as females in what was, the sport of kings, to now where I truly haven't felt a lot of resistance in terms of just because I'm female. The one thing that I get a lot would be people saying things like, "Oh, you really know your stuff." And to me, I'm not offended. I take it as a compliment. But yeah, of course I should know my stuff. This is my job and this is what I live and breathe.
But it's an interesting point because I think we like to think that as a society, I guess we've gained so much ground in this space in terms of equality, and in terms of, females being able to take on careers that were traditionally male dominated. When someone comes up and says that to you, I mean, maybe not now because you've worked out a way to sort of tackle it, but the first few times people said that to you, like, "Oh, you know your stuff," quite surprised. What did that do, I guess, to your confidence? And what does that sort of say about where we are as a society? Do we have more work to be done?
Well, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because on one hand, it's a compliment because they are acknowledging the fact that, oh, you are doing a good job and you do know what you're talking about. So in one way, it's a compliment, but on the other hand, that means they really underestimated me to start with. So yeah, you probably are right. There probably is work to be done, that it's not something that needs to be foreign, that, a woman can just know just as much about sport as a man can.
Yeah, look, it's so interesting. And it brings me to my next point because I want to talk about, I guess, one of the biggest moments for females in racing. And that was when the amazing Michelle Payne, she won the Melbourne Cup in 2015. This was the first female jockey in the Cup's 155-year history to win the Cup on Pirates of Penzance. Let's cast our memories back and take a look at Michelle Payne coming down the straight.
Followed then by Who Shot the Barman, going for a run on the inside is our Ivanhoe. Coming past the 300 metres, Excess Knowledge went to the lead narrowly. Here's Prince of Penzance coming on down the outside. Prince of Penzance for Michelle Payne. Now Max Dynamite starts to charge home. Prince of Penzance from Max Dynamite. Prince of Penzance, it's history at Flemington. Michelle Payne. Prince of Penzance beat Max Dynamite. Criterions run third, then either trip to Paris Gust to win or...
Oh, it still gives me chills. History made at Flemington, doesn't it? I mean, where were you when that moment happened? Like Michelle Payne winning the Cup as a female in the industry. Like, what impact did that have on you? And I guess over the last couple of years, speaking to other women, what impact has it had on them within the industry?
It's funny. I was only just speaking to someone this morning, our apprentice jockey, Rosie, and she's a young female, 21 years old, who has decided to embark on the path of becoming a jockey, and she's just started her apprenticeship. But we were actually speaking about, female jockeys and their role in these big races coming up throughout the carnival. And we were talking about Michelle Payne, and she was telling me that she specifically remembers being at school that day and everyone was sort of like, "Oh, who are you going for in the Cup?" And she said, "Oh, well, the girl, of course." And she asked her dad, she said, "Dad, you've got to have money. There's a girl riding in the Cup." And I mean, Prince of Penzance was 100 to 1 that day. It was massive odds. And so she told her dad, "Make sure you have something on." And sure enough, history has it that Michelle would go on to win the cup, and she'd come home from school and say to her dad, well, did you put it on? And he said, no, I didn't. So he never put the bet on Prince of Penzance. She's never let him live it. But hear her that's now gone on to forge a path to become a jockey. I think you can't underestimate what a moment like that does to sort of change the pathway for people going forward. And even furthermore to that is probably the movie that then came out, Ride Like a Girl. I think Rachel Griffiths did such a great job to portray the whole story and the struggles that Michelle had been through, and being a female in the industry, and then that culminating in this big success. There are so many little girls who I think will now grow up and watch that movie. And already I speak to a lot of girls on the mounting yard, on their fence, and they come up and they say, have you seen Ride Like a Girl? Like, it's my favorite movie. And I think that's really special that they have something that they can look at, that they can, aspire to be. I feel the same way about, say, the AFLW and how we've seen so much movement in the sport of AFL as well. And it's drawn its criticism. People have been critical of the fact that, it hasn't been, a premium product, that it's been low scoring and things like that. But to me, the bigger picture is so much more important. And that is that any little girl growing up who wants to play football now has a pathway to not have to stop at some point. I remember as a kid, I would have loved to have played Auskick, and I think I played a few games with my brother's team, but then as you get to a certain age, you're told you can't do it because you're a girl. And I don't think any little girl should ever have to stop doing something that her brother can do just because she's a female.
Oh, it's so important, isn't it? And I think we sort of take that part, I guess, a little bit for granted at the moment, because we are sort of having a bit more of an open discussion about these things. Those pathways are opening up, but it's only because of these trailblazers that have really forged that path for us. And I mean, I guess when we talk about female jockeys now, I mean, Jamie Carr, Rachel King, Kira Yule, I mean, the list goes on. They are flying at the moment, Jamie Carr in particular. And I think, how do you sort of find that? Because you're around these racetracks all the time. What's the future of the industry looking like? Are there more females popping up and deciding to take on this path in the racing industry?
It's quite amazing, particularly at the country tracks. So when I cover the meetings there's obviously two sets of change rooms. You've got the boys and the girls, and one's always bigger than the other. And these days what's happening is that obviously the boys' change room was always the big one, and the girls' change room is just a small one for the couple girls that were there. And now it's completely changed where they're swapping, because it's almost all female at these meetings and then only a couple of boys. So they're actually swapping change rooms at a lot of these provincial country sort of meetings. So you can see that shift there. I think you only have to look at the apprentice school intake, and a lot of that is females coming through. And it makes sense. Females biologically are lighter. It's a hard slog being a jockey. They have to do a lot of work in terms of their dieting and keeping their weight down to 54 kilos. Like, that is not an easy task for a female, let alone, a big guy. So I think we're seeing a lot more girls come through because of that. And at grassroots level, Pony Club, there's a lot more females doing that as well. So it makes sense that they then forge the path into a career out of riding horses.
Yeah, and I mean, look, speaking of history being made, last year, 2019, you made your own history. You were selected to be the first female horseback reporter for the Melbourne Cup for the Channel 10 coverage. You were the first one to speak to Craig Williams, one of Australia's most esteemed jockeys, after his ride on Vow and Declare. That is huge, Britt. Like, did that sink in at the time, what a huge accolade that actually was?
I think yes, and there's two parts to this, I guess. The female part, maybe not so much. I heard Rachel King during the week actually speaking to this sort of point where she said, she's about to become the first female to ride in the Everest. And she said she doesn't like to dwell too much on the fact that it's a male-female thing, because at the end of the day, once those gates open, they're on a level playing field. It doesn't matter whether she's male or female. And I guess that's the whole thing of equality, is probably not wanting to draw upon that. But then at the same time, she said she's happy to be a part of that history. She's happy that she's the first one, and that's her name in the record books, and it's something that she can tell her kids and grandkids. And by that same sort of logic, that's, I guess, how I felt as well. It's I was really proud to do the role and have the responsibility of being able to tell the story of the Cup winner and all the great tales throughout that week by being the first person to go and speak to the jockey, because of the enormity of that moment for them. Not necessarily because I was the first female or anything like that, but I was just really proud to do the role, full stop, because I guess when you're growing up and setting goals in anything, the Melbourne Cup is the pinnacle of racing. So if you're a jockey, you want to ride a Melbourne Cup winner, and if you're a trainer, you want to train a Melbourne Cup winner. But I guess as a broadcaster, you want to reach the top in broadcast, and that would be to be part of a Melbourne Cup coverage. And so I'd only started in broadcast a few years before, and I was doing the Sky Academy, and we had to write down, what's the dream, what's the goal, and I did actually write down to be a part of a Melbourne Cup coverage. So to have that dream realised only probably 2 years later was really special.
I mean, we've got some vision here of you actually talking to Craig Williams, obviously at the end of the Cup ride, which was just the moment that all of Australia is, eyes glued to their screens, wherever they are, they're watching this. And then you get to speak to Craig Williams, who you have grown up watching, and such admiration and respect for Craig, one of Australia's most esteemed jockeys. I mean, what was that moment like?
There's few moments that you get, I guess, before you're even live. I think I said something else like, Craig, you've done it. You've done it. Like, he'd been trying to win the Cup. This was his first Melbourne Cup. He's won pretty much everything else there was to win. And just to be able to be in that moment and soak up the energy that was coming from him. And, he's the most grateful man on the planet. And I think we saw that in the interview. He thanked absolutely everyone. And the crazy part is that that's so authentic, because even when the camera goes off, he's still thinking of the people that he needs to thank, and that his team and everything like that. So it was a real honour for it to be Craig. I'd sort of given a lot of thought to who I would like that Melbourne Cup winning jockey to be, and I had a few thoughts. I obviously grew up watching Frankie Dettori a lot, and he's someone who's come so close in so many cups and hasn't been able to win it, and so he's so effervescent. I thought it would go worldwide. That would be a really big moment to capture. So I thought he would be away links with a Damien Oliver or a Damian Lane, and we're obviously very tribal and patriotic when it comes to the West, and so I was hoping it could be one of those. But if it wasn't to be one of those, Craig Williams couldn't have been a better person to be able to interview, because even when I first got there, and obviously I was sort of like the new kid on the block doing these interviews, most of them had never met me, I had to go into the jockeys room before Derby Day and just introduce myself and say, hey, I'm taking over the interviews for this week, so if the crazy girl comes up to you on the grey horse and a microphone, please talk to me. And Damien Oliver was good enough to stand up and introduce me to the room, but beyond that, Craig Williams was the first person to come up and say, hey, Britt, how are you? And I just thought, that was so nice to make me feel so welcome, and I was just so genuinely happy for him to win the Cup.
Oh, amazing. Gives me chills just hearing about it. I mean, obviously, look, this is exciting news because you're returning to the Spring Carnival coverage this year with Channel 10. But of course, with COVID-19, this is going to be a Spring Carnival like no other. And I think, none of us expected that we would be approaching this time of year. We're going to have the bare minimum in terms of spectators trackside, as opposed to the 110,000 that was watching Craig Williams last year. I mean, how strange is that going to be this year, I guess, for the Spring Carnival? And I guess two parts to that is that how much work has actually gone into the industry having to pivot to keep racing going through this year? It's been quite remarkable.
Oh, it's been crazy. I mean, we've been very, very lucky in Western Australia. There was a period of time, obviously, where there was no one allowed on course. And so to be able to continue to do my job, we had to do, COVID-safe interview stations. And it was foreign. It's really, really weird not to have a microphone in hand and just being able to, just pass the microphone over to the person who's talking, and we had to have these stations where you'd stand at least 1.5 meters, if not even further apart, and sanitizing everything down. It's just things that have, I guess, become commonplace to us now. You walk into any workplace and there's sanitizer and things like that. We're all very conscious of our hygiene and everything like that. But for racing to continue, there was a very, very strict protocols in place. There was the temperature checking on the way in. So we're talking office people who have worked really hard over their career. You're looking at, your PR team, marketing team, your HR consultants, like all these people who are, very professional in their own right. Well, they basically had to down tools in terms of their corporate job in the, office to govern racing. And they were out there in the car park on freezing cold days through winter with their temperature checkers to make sure that racing could continue. So it involved a lot of sacrifice to be able to continue. And I mean, I'm only speaking of what happened in Western Australia. We're extremely lucky now to be to pretty much feel like we're back to a lot of normality. There's crowds back on track for us, and I know that must be so foreign to anyone watching in Melbourne, because of you guys are still in lockdown and in such a still heightened state of the masks and everything like that. So looking forward to this carnival. It is going to be different. I believe I'll have the mask on the horse and everything like that. So I don't really know what to expect, but obviously it's going to be very different from last year.
Well, look, on a personal note, and I didn't want to bring that up, but you said WA is just flying in terms of not being in lockdown and crowds being at the track. And I'm very upset because in WA, because I've usually only moved to Melbourne this year, good year to do it. But in WA, and people would know this, but we actually would travel around to a lot of the regional carnivals together. So we would host fashions on the field. You were obviously also doing some reporting trackside. And it's just amazing to see what country racing does for the local communities. I mean, how important is that, I guess, that grassroots level to the success of the industry?
Oh, vitally important, and even more so maybe to the success of the town, because it really is an economic driver. The races being on is so important for those places that, we would always be travelling to Broome, to Kalgoorlie, Geraldton, doing all of the country carnival sort of tracks, and you just see the amount of people that flock to the races. I was only in Kalgoorlie just last week, and to see how many people, that town was just alive. And I think it's been even more so because we can't travel overseas or even interstate at the moment. So we're traveling within WA, and the town didn't know what to do with itself. There were just people everywhere. The crowds were enormous on track, which is a great, great thing to see.
Well, and I mean, they wouldn't have known what to do with themselves last year either when we were on the hunt for a karaoke bar at stupid o'clock.
Oh, Alana, you need to deliver some of your beautiful singing voice, because I think we couldn't find the karaoke bar, so I think we settled for YouTube karaoke, and I think we just settled into the hotel room, if I recall correctly.
It's a show for another day. I mean, look, well, I guess when we look at everything that you've seen from watching your dad, as a young girl, as a trainer, to working in the stables, to travelling to these regional carnivals, interviewing a Melbourne Cup winner at Flemington. I mean, how do you see the growth of the industry from here, and in particular women's involvement?
I think the growth is exponential, and I think it's only going to continue. I was asked last year, I think just before I did the Cup, do you think there will be another female Melbourne Cup winner? And I said it is only a matter of time. I would bet my life on it that there will be another, and I think we'll just see women riders, women trainers, and just across the whole board. It's not just, I guess, the people that you see at the forefront either. It's those behind the scenes that work on the administration side of racing as well. There are plenty of females involved in that space, and it's come a long way. Women in sport, be it racing, be it football, cricket, whatever it may be, we've seen a lot of growth already, and I think it's only going to keep continuing, and we'll only see more and more women involved.
What about in general? Like, because obviously you're a young woman and you're already hitting some serious strides in your career. But I mean, 2020 has been really challenging. There's a lot of people in a really, delicate state mentally. A lot of people have been out of jobs or redundant or having to look at other career paths. What is your message, I guess, to young women, and particularly those ones that are also fighting to be recognised in against, I guess, male-dominated industries?
I've always lived by the quote, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think it's absolutely imperative if you want to achieve something is that you have to work really, really hard towards it. And I think if you do, and follow those right pathways and figure out a way what your goal is and the way to get there, I think anything is possible, and I really, really believe that. But in terms of this year, obviously it's it's not a case of just the harder you work, because that's sort of been taken away from a lot of people, that there hasn't been the option to work hard because they've lost jobs and everything like that. So I think it's important to be adaptable as well, and this year's taught us that a lot. I think for everything that's been bad that's gone on in the world this year, I think there are a lot of silver linings. I think it's really important to look at the positives of it. And when I look at the world in general, like right now, we're able to do an interview that's not in person, and we're seeing that so much in all sorts of, television and broadcast and meetings as well. People now can work from home. And whilst that's probably not seeming like a luxury when you're stuck at home every day in Melbourne, I think once you're back to a little bit of normality, what I'm seeing in WA is a lot of my friends are, taking 1 or 2 days a week where they work from home. And that's really working well for the work-life balance, and being able to, for parents to be able to still be at their child's assembly and still be working without having to take a full day off. So I think that we've seen a lot of good come out of this year for what has been a terrible year, if that makes sense.
I love it. I love the positivity. Well, Britt, when can we expect you to land in Melbourne for Spring Carnival? And are you going to be covering all the major race days?
Yes, looking forward to it. So I'll arrive a couple days before Derby Day and begin then. And then whether I'm there for the 4 days or not sure, because I have to come home and quarantine for 14 days. That would mean that I would have to miss Railway Stakes Day in Perth.
Oh,
so
I see what's going on here.
Yeah. So
the battle lines.
Fingers crossed. Exactly. So I think I'll just be there till Oaks Day and then be coming home so that I can cover the 3 days of the Masters Carnival, which are our 3 biggest days here in the West.
Well, we have absolutely loved having you on the program this afternoon, Britt. It's so interesting. I think, racing's close to my heart as well as it is to yours. And it's just so amazing, I guess, to shine a light on the industry, and particularly the females that are really forging that path, and you being one of them. So thank you for joining us here on the program. We can't wait to see you on the Channel 10 coverage of the Spring Carnival for 2020.
Thanks so much for having me.
Brittany Taylor there joining us. Thanks so much for being here. You've been watching TickHER. Join us again next Friday as we continue to celebrate representation and inclusion in business and shine a light on women who are making strides in their industries. We've been brought to you today by Modibody, period and leak-proof apparel and underwear. For more info, you can head to modibody.com. I'm Alana McLean. Thanks for your company. I'll see you again next week.
Stream us live on the TickHER app, Apple TV, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and TickerTV.com.au. TickHER, streaming news now.